So Texans have lost their mind. The Trump Republicans, Trump has forced Texas or encouraged Texas to do this mid-year redistricting. And California's not going to take it. We don't turn back from a fight.
What happens when the rules of democracy get thrown out of the window? What happens when politicians in other states try to rig elections before a single vote is cast? And what happens when California families are caught in the crossfire of a national power grab? Welcome to Prescribing a Healthier Future. I am your host, Dr. Akilah Weber Pierson. As a medical doctor and a California state senator, I see firsthand how political decisions impact the health and well-beings of our communities. Today, we are confronting an emergency that threatens not just our democracy, but the very programs that keep our families healthy, housed, and fed. In August, at the urging of President Trump, Texas Republicans redrew their congressional maps in an unprecedented mid-decade power grab. Their goal? To manufacture a Republican majority in Congress regardless of how Americans actually vote. Florida is following suit. North Carolina and Georgia are considering the same. On November 4th, California voters will decide whether to fight back with Proposition 50, the Election Rigging Response Act. It is a tough choice, but one that could determine whether we have any check on President Trump's power for the next 2 years. To help us understand what's at stake for our communities, I am joined by Will Rodriguez Kennedy, chair of the San Diego County Democratic Party, and a fierce advocate for protecting democracy. Before we dive in, if you believe in the importance of these conversations, please take a moment to like, subscribe, or follow right now on whatever platform you're using. It really helps us reach more people. Well, thank you so much for being here and allowing for us to have this very important conversation at this very critical moment. So I want to begin first by congratulating you on your recent election or re-election to becoming the party chair for the San Diego County Democratic Party. What's going on?
Well, in terms of Prop 50, there's a lot going on. So Texans have lost their mind. The Trump Republicans, Trump has forced Texas or encouraged Texas to do this mid-year redistricting. And California's not going to take it. We don't turn back from a fight. So Governor Newsom put together the Proposition 50, the Election Rigging Response Act, and what it does is it's really simple. For a one-time period and a temporary period, it redistricts the congressional districts to give more Democratic representation to counterbalance the power grab that's happening in Texas. And the difference between what Texas is doing and what we're doing is that while Texas and their legislature is shoving it down Texan throats, we are asking our people for permission to do this. So we're fighting this with democracy, and we're asking our voters a very simple thing: can you give us the power to fight fire with fire?
Yeah. So many listeners may not realize historically what happens. So historically, we do redistricting every 10 years, and it is in conjunction with the census. And so people move around, and we want to make sure that people have equal representation. Populations boom, and some people have a decrease in their population. And so to ensure that everyone has equal representation, that is when we normally do redistricting. This is different. And some may say it is a huge damage to our potential democracy. What are your thoughts?
Well, this is basically if you're playing a game or something and someone comes in and decides to change the rules in the middle of the game. Like that, nobody likes that, and it's wrong. And in this case, it's unprecedented in American history. We don't have a situation where congressional districts are just at the whim of a legislature somewhere can just change the rules of the game and rig the system in their favor. They're doing this for one reason. It's because they know that if nothing changes, that the people have had it with their regime, and that next election they're going to lose. So in the history of our country, this has not happened. There have been other things where, like, there's been redistricting at different points, but most of those have been because of lawsuits or something where, you have governors redistricting states or legislators redistricting states to the disadvantage of, like, communities of color. We've seen Ron DeSantis do that in Florida, basically personally redrawing the maps to disadvantage specifically the Black and Latino communities. So, they're changing the game. They're changing the rules of the game. They're changing the game. And California and Democrats in general, we believe in independent redistricting, but we can't unilaterally disarm, especially to the detriment of Texas. They're a big state, and they're trying to basically diminish our ability to have our voice represented in Congress, and we just can't have that.
So, some may say, who cares what happens in Texas? We need to focus on California. We need to focus on fixing the issues right here at home. I have my response, and we can have a conversation about that, but just wondering what your response would be to that.
Well, I'm always curious about your thoughts on things, but I would say it directly affects California. For one, we are a fire-prone state, and we just saw as the Republicans and Donald Trump considered withholding fire disaster aid to California because he just doesn't like us. That's outrageous on its face, but there's also healthcare, which we have to worry about. I mean, we've seen with the big ugly bill or whatever that they are defunding a lot of, like, Medicaid is at risk, Medicare is threatened. The whole system is kind of at risk because of the lack or the cuts in Medicaid. We could have entire hospitals go down. That's a major problem here in California. And then beyond that, it's our economy. Here in San Diego, our economy is dependent on federal sanity. We have the border, we have the military, we have research and funding and whatnot that are important to half of our economy. Just right there, that's half of our economy. So what happens in Texas and what happens with this regime and its instability, whether it's tariffs or whether it's their unhinged healthcare policy, directly affects San Diegans and Californians.
I love how you put that together, because I think people don't often recognize the significance of what happens in Washington, D.C. We are so far geographically away from D.C. that we don't realize that the policies that they pass or don't pass have a direct impact on our everyday lives, on our communities, all the way down to our schools and how those are funded, our healthcare, how those are funded. And so it is extremely important to yes, look at what's happening on a local level, look at what's happening on a state level, but to never lose eyesight of what's happening on the federal level. This has been an interesting year. That's how I tell people. It's been a very interesting year.
That's a word.
It is a word, and it feels like it's been longer than a year, to be quite honest with you. But, one of the things that I always think about when we're talking about elections is that gives your constituents, your voters, the opportunity to say, we agree with what you're doing, and we want to give you more time. Or saying, we don't agree with what you're doing, it's time to change course.
Right.
And when I look at this election rigging that Texas and other states are doing based on what President Trump has requested of them, it is a way to prevent that accountability from the voters. And that is what is most concerning for me. And that is one of the reasons why, as a state senator, I supported giving our voters the option of voting whether or not they wanted to redraw our congressional lines as well. Because I do believe that it is a part of your job as as someone in public service, to ensure that you are truly serving the public that you are supposed to be serving. And if not, giving them the opportunity at the appropriate time to say that those policies aren't working. So let's talk about some of the things that have happened this last year, even though it hasn't even been a year yet, but over, this year. We've had, as you said, fires. We've had ICE raids, still have those.
Mm-hmm.
We have the dismantling of our education department.
Mm-hmm.
We have the defunding of many of our universities and research,
Mm-hmm.
which is extremely important here in San Diego. We are a research-driven system, and our UCs are very research-driven, and a lot of funding that they have are from federal grants. We have a target to our healthcare systems, especially those who are the least served that need the most resources. Am I missing anything?
Oh man, there's so many things. It's all over the place.
Yeah.
Those are like the high points. I mean, I don't think people understood just how widespread the damage that this administration could do, but all the warning signs were there. I mean, they have Project 2025. There's like a literal tracker that says that like they're like 60% of where they want to go, and where they wanted to go was basically an authoritarian, right-leaning regime. I mean, we are dealing with people who have had time to really think about how to dismantle our republic, and how to do things that I think, like, if you look at it, I mean, the system's broken for a lot of people, but the rich get wealthier. Like we're seeing this like massive turn of wealth from everyday people to the wealthiest people, who just happen to be the friends of like Donald Trump and Elon Musk, and all those people are doing fine. But for anyone else who has to put food on the table or have healthcare or like go to college or go into a trade or something, we're all struggling. Like, I make more than my parents did at my age, and I am definitely nowhere close to like making it ends meet. And I'm from the working class. You are as well. So like, there's a lot going on here. It's hard to even pinpoint all the things, and that's kind of the intent.
Right.
They're trying to do everything they can. They know the people who are behind Trump, maybe he's not the sophisticated, the mastermind, but the people who are behind him, they know that they have a limited window to get things done, and that window is 2026. If they don't get anything in this first Congress, this Congress that they have control over, they know that their agenda will flatline because Democratic opposition will be everywhere. So the one thing we can do to check the Trump agenda is make sure that we take back Congress, and we can't even wait. We have to get to the streets now because everything is just horrible, frankly.
Yeah. You know, what's interesting is that with everything that has happened, and we've talked about some of them, and the cost of living has gotten worse.
Oh, yeah.
Food prices have gone up. The cost of housing, up.
Right.
So in the midst of all of this other chaos that we're dealing with, some of the things that we talked about, other things we didn't, such as like censorship and all of those things.
Right.
The quality of life for everyday Americans, everyday Californians, everyday San Diegans has not improved.
Right.
And normally, again, people would have their ability to have their voices heard through their votes. But because of this power grab and this inability for this current administration to really be accountable for their actions over this last 9 months, our democracy really truly is at risk. I want to bring it back to some of the things that have come or will be coming down the pike with President Trump's, as he called, big, beautiful bill. I will just refer to it from now on as just HR1.
Sure.
So there's a lot of conversation about the impacts to our Medicaid system, our SNAP programs, the impacts to our hospitals and things like that. And I just want to remind everyone, because we hear Medicaid. Some people may not realize or make the connection that Medicaid in California is Medi-Cal.
Right.
And so when you hear Medicaid, we're talking about Medi-Cal.
Right.
And So congressional Republicans in this H.R. 1 passed $863 billion Medi-Cal cuts over the next 10 years.
Right.
That is significant. A significant number of people will lose their health care insurance. Here in San Diego County, about 888,000 residents are on Medi-Cal. These are the ones that will be impacted by these cuts that will be starting in 2026 and 2027 as a result of H.R. 1. Our health centers are extremely important. Our health centers serve over 32 million people in 2024, with 90% having incomes at or below the 200% federal poverty level. Federal cuts are going to significantly impact these health centers that our residents use for their everyday healthcare needs.
Yep.
Also in this H.R. 1, House Republicans passed $186 to $300 billion of SNAP cuts through 2034. And again, for our residents here, I want people to know SNAP in California is called CalFresh. So these terms that you may have heard, you may be like, oh, I don't know what that is. Right. Da, da, da. We have that here because here in San Diego County, over 400,000 people, including 130,000 children and 100,000 seniors, are on CalFresh, and they are vulnerable to lose some or all of their benefits. And so, we know that these programs, the ability to get health care, the ability to get food, it helps with overall well-being. It helps from prevention of chronic illnesses. We don't want kids going to school hungry. Programs like SNAP or CalFresh here in California have helped alleviated many children who are food insecure and are now going to be at risk as a result of the passage of H.R. 1. Right. Can you tell me, in your words, why you think some of these things are critical to allow Californians to voice whether or not they think that we are going in the right direction with some of these policies?
So this eats at my core because I'm a New Yorker actually originally. I'm from the South Bronx. My mom was a single parent of 4, and without public housing, without their version of CalFresh in New York, without those public subsidies, I'm not sure I live through that time. People have to understand 880,000 people losing any sort of benefits, but particularly healthcare. I mean, it won't be all of them, but it could be as many as half. It's a significant a number of people who just immediately no longer have health care. That puts us all at risk for a number of reasons. One, the healthcare, the hospitals and the medical centers rely on reimbursements from the federal government in order to sustain themselves, which means it's not just about the people who are losing their health care. It's everyone hospitals start going under because they no longer have income. So, people, unfortunately, in the age we are really quick to disassociate themselves from the damage. They're like, okay, well, people who are on Medi-Cal and SNAP, that's their problem. They're poor. They're not making it. They're not making it. But really, it affects everyone because if you don't have money going into hospitals, then suddenly your hospital care and then your doctors don't get paid. And then maybe you don't have the same doctors. Maybe you don't have the same health care. Maybe the hospital doesn't exist anymore. And once you get into that scenario, we have people dying. And so that's one of the most horrible things. In the SNAP situation, I believe I just read not too long ago that they're also going to stop tracking the consequences of this. So they'll say oh, the problem's not there because we're no longer measuring the problem anymore. So and then the dismantle of the Department of Education, that just puts our our education funds and there's such uncertainty, and people, hospital districts, schools, businesses cannot plan with this level of uncertainty at the top. So, it's easy to, these are big numbers. It's hard to, 881,000 people. That's more than every single Democrat in the county. So that was if every single Democrat in the county just lost their health care. That's an amazing number right there. That's bigger than all the cities except one. That's a big number, but really having so many people affected really affects us all, from the economy to our own healthcare to just the societal fabric of our country. Like, it's not these people will lose out and nobody will get affected. No, everyone loses out when these policies go through in DC.
Yeah, no, I'm so happy that you brought that up, because people do often believe that it's them over there and I live over here and I have insurance, so I'll be okay. Without realizing what you were talking about is that hospitals rely on these funds. Hospitals rely on these patients having Medi-Cal, getting money, getting reimbursed from the federal government for serving them. Newsflash, people get sick. People are not going to stop getting sick as a result of them losing insurance. The issue is going to be that they're going to come to get care. That care will have to be provided, but who will ultimately end up paying for that care?
Everyone else.
Everyone else. And you may end up paying for it in a way, as you were mentioning, that your hospital closes. Or if they don't close, they close some of their services.
Yep.
One of the things that I have focused a lot on since I've been in Sacramento is the closure of our labor and delivery units.
Yep.
There are some places here in the state where people have to drive 2 hours to get to their closest labor and delivery unit, because hospitals have realized that I don't get enough reimbursement for certain things. And so they've had to make the difficult decisions to cut out certain services. That is what's going to happen in this particular situation. Services will start dwindling. You, with your insurance, will have to start driving farther and farther away from your community to receive the care that you should be able to get from your local hospital. But because they don't have those finances anymore, they've had to start doing more of what's called uncompensated care, meaning they just take care of people because they're sick and they come in, but they have no insurance. So ultimately, it is going to impact all of us, and our systems will crumble as a result of it. I want to talk to you about environmental issues.
Okay.
You know that President Trump was just at the UN yesterday and was basically stating that, you know, the climate crisis is a hoax. But the reason why I want to bring this up in this discussion about Prop 50 and about the things that have been done during this particular administration is that many of these environmental programs are being slashed.
Yep.
Many of these environmental justice programs, which specifically targets individuals and children who are in communities that have been disproportionately impacted by air toxins, water pollutants, and therefore you see like higher rates of asthma in those communities. And so there have been lately different programs from the federal or from the state that specifically go into those communities to try to clean it up and to address some of those issues, to decrease some of those health concerns. Those things are being threatened under this administration. How do you see what has happened over these last 9 months in this current administration from an environmental standpoint and an environmental justice standpoint, a detrimental impact to the residents of San Diego County?
So the administration doesn't even agree on the science, much less the facts associated with the very real impacts of various types of environmental issues, from, you know, the direct impacts of like having unclean air to the longer term impacts of climate change. And that is kind of outrageous, but it you're a Star Wars fan.
I am, you know I am.
and Andor, she says the loss of an objective reality is like the goal of absolute evil or something like that. And that's what we're kind of in right now. We are having people who are just divorcing themselves from objective reality, and they're doing it again. It all ties back to the fact that like the people who benefit from this are corporations, large corporations that are polluters, or large corporations that are, you know, that have industries which may harm the environment. So they want to drill, baby, drill. They want to do all these. They don't want like proper standards or whatever. They want to loosen the standards so that companies can thrive. This is again another situation where not only are they transferring wealth from one side, from the everyone, to a very small group of people, but they're also doing it to the detriment of the health of everyone to this small group of people. And so, on the environmental issues, California, one of the unifying things, this isn't even partisan. We want clean air, we want clean water, we want, to be able to enjoy our beaches, right? That's California. They don't care. And not only do they not care, they don't care in really horrible and cruel and capricious ways. So like, it's hard to like, just state how bad this is, but DC, when we talked about in the beginning how DC's like how we're so divorced from what happens in DC, the people who are making policy decisions in DC, they have no idea and they do not care about what's happening in Main Street. And it's like kind of like the whole like thing, like the Capitol is the problem and the people are the solution. And that's what we're talking about with Prop 50. We cannot wait for Congress to do anything. First of all, the current majority has basically bowed down to the new tyrant or to the only tyrant. And we have a chance now to actually do something to change the course of our nation. We can either continue down this path of deregulation, of transferring wealth from the lowest to the highest, of threatening our healthcare system, of our rights, the immigration system, which we haven't even touched, but is a huge thing locally, and obviously is front of mind for both of us. But they are Prop 50 is the answer. It's the answer for people who are frustrated every day, who are like, I want to protest, I want to do everything, I want to stop this from happening. Well, your answer on what to do is to get out the vote for Prop 50. Like, that is the chance for the people to do something about what's happening in DC right now.
So I think that's a great segue. Let's talk about Prop 50.
Sure.
You mentioned it a little bit in the beginning, but there's a lot of talk about we're just, two wrongs don't make a right. That I heard that a lot when we were dealing with it in the legislature as to whether or not we were going to allow this to go on the ballot or vote for it to go on the ballot. Two wrongs don't make a right. We need to always, take the moral high ground. When they go low, we go higher, those kind of things. And so there's a lot of questions, concerns, issues, rumors, whatever you want to call it, around what Prop 50 is and what it will do. So I'm just going to ask you a couple of things.
Sure.
Prop 50, if it were to pass, is it permanent?
No.
Okay.
Straight out. It's a temporary thing that we are trying to do for the remainder of this term. Embedded in Prop 50, as you know as a legislator, is the fact that we will return power to the Independent Redistricting Commission, which is what we all believe in. The Democratic position and the position of reasonable minds everywhere is that independent redistricting is the gold standard. We want to take the ability to redistrict out of the hands of the politicians who stand to benefit the most. This is not that. We are literally doing a surgical, strategic thing to address a specific threat to democracy that is happening out of Texas. And not just the threat to democracy, a threat to everything. Healthcare, our economy, our environment, all of that stuff is under risk if we have another 2 years of this Congress, of this current Congress that just does whatever Trump wants. So, this is not that. It's not even gerrymandering per se. I mean, gerrymandering is when elected officials do it themselves and then they pass it, like what Texas did. We're asking the people. We are literally engaging in a democratic act, the most democratic act. All power to the people at this point. Like, we want them to say, hey, you see what's happening in Texas? You want to stand with us and fight this? And I'm seeing a lot of people in the streets. Yeah, they definitely do. We saw at the No Kings rally. We saw at the labor rally not too long ago. There's all sorts of people who want to get up and do something now. California is activated and they're angry about what's happening in DC. And so this is a democratic act. It's not two wrongs make a right. It's not even a wrong. We're asking the people for their permission. That's how democracy works. And so a lot of people are talking about this moral high ground. And, it's not possible to be on the moral high ground when the ground is collapsing beneath you, because these swamp monsters in DC are literally undermining the ground that we've been standing on. And we are maintaining the moral high ground by returning that power and telling the people straight up, This goes back to independent redistricting. And one of the first things we do when we take back Congress, we start passing laws like the For the People Act, which would push a nationwide effort to get independent redistricting everywhere. Because that's really the problem. We're doing it, and they keep on changing the rules. It's like Lucy with the football. Like, we keep on trying to set democratic norms, and then they just take away the football from us, and now we're fighting on their frame like we're the wrong ones for trying to fight back from them. It's just, there is only one wrong here. They're trying to rig the election. We're trying to fight that. And that's it.
Okay. Well, then answer this question for me. So you talked about Texas legislators or the governor drawing their maps how they want to.
Yep.
Breaking up communities of color. Really going against the Voting Rights Act, to be quite honest with you. I mean, isn't that the same thing that happened with the maps that, we're supposed to be voting on? I mean, I know the answer, but I want you to.
Well, no, because our voting our maps are designed to respect the Voting Rights Act. So, we maintain the principles of democracy. We want to maintain diversity. We want to maintain as much of a voice as possible. There are some people who are like, we're just doing the same thing, and we're just not. They did it without consulting their voters, and they're shoving it down their throats. That's why we have Texans in Dallas trying to help San Diego Democrats trying to pass Prop 50. We have a scenario where they don't care about the Voting Rights Act. I mean, we've seen their governors literally try to write maps to challenge the Voting Rights Act because they think the Supreme Court will help undermine the Voting Rights Act, which is what they've been doing. So we respect all that. We give the power to the people. The people get to decide this. This is not some party leaders like in a dark room, as what happened in Texas, deciding what happens for our state, a state this big with 40 million people. This is us telling our voters, do you want to fight this? And I think the answer is yes.
I think another key point to also put out is that Governor Newsom did not draw these maps. The state assembly did not draw these maps. The state senate did not draw these maps. And so unlike what you saw in Texas, where you did have the politicians essentially drawing their maps, we as legislators and the governor did not draw these maps. Right. There was a respect for the Voting Rights Act to prevent communities of color from being, broken up. And also, the organizations that actually drew the maps went back and looked at what the Independent Redistricting Commission did, looked at their hearings from when they drew the lines in 2020 to ensure that what was drawn was in alignment with what the communities said that they wanted back when they were having those hearings before the line. So there are, in addition to the fact that, we are allowing, at the end of the day, we're allowing the voters of California to determine whether or not they want to redraw the maps. There are other differences in what we have done here in California versus what they have done there in Texas. All right, so it's not permanent. The legislators and the governor didn't draw the maps. What happens in 2030?
Well, in 2030, we still have this district, but then right after that, we have the census, which is another a place of concern because the Trump administration is in charge of that. But they'll have the decennial census, and then in 2032 is when, during the interim between 2030 and 2032, the Independent Redistricting Commission will, at all levels of government in California, basically, will reconvene, and they will redraw the maps based on the principles that we've established in California by constitutional amendment, which is an independent process. They decide the maps, and then we have new maps. So the norm, the democratic norm that we've established maintains. This is, again, almost, I don't want to say a wartime act, but this is an emergency action. We have Texas trying to take away the voices of Texans, frankly, that affects all of Congress. And and we just have to fight back. We can't allow them to constantly be pulling these rules changes and just like rigging the system, and then us staying here and saying, oh, well, we have to keep the moral high ground. Mm-hmm. We are keeping the moral high ground, but the moral high ground, you can fight morally. So, I think California has a fighting spirit. Mm-hmm. I'm a New Yorker. New York has a fighting spirit. They're looking at this as well for the next cycle. I think it's time to stand up and fight, and Californians need to like stand up against the risk, because it's becoming a state versus state type of thing. Like, and to be honest, if we won, we'd be helping a bunch of people in red states too, because if you want to talk about health impacts and environmental impacts, the worst are in places like Mississippi and Alabama and places like that. California is doing a lot better. We just don't, there's like propaganda thinking that like, I mean, if you ask my parents in Florida, they think we're burning and there's homeless people everywhere. And, we have problems, but like the problems that are happening in the middle of the country, like that's where it's at. So it's not only a thing that will help us immediately, it'll help the country, and it'll fight an existential threat to our republic, which is they're fixing the rules, they're rigging the system, and we need to stand up to that.
Yeah, exactly. So in 2030, power goes back to the Independent Redistricting Commission, and we proceed as what we have been doing since the voters decided that they wanted this. So one of the things that we always are concerned about is people saying, I'm not interested, I'm not going to vote. Like, this is ridiculous, or I've got other things to do, even though your ballot comes to your house and you don't have to go anywhere, right? But what do you think the consequences would be if people don't go and vote?
Well, this is one of those situations where you really have to get as many people out as possible, because if we lose and they continue fixing rigging Congress the way that they want, it affects everyone. And there's no one who doesn't have skin in this game. If you live in our environment, if you have health care, if you have any sort of federal benefit, if you live on the border, which we all do, we have a vested interest. San Diego's economy lives and dies on federal sanity. Mm-hmm. If we continue with this sort of tariff situation where there's not consistency, our economy is starting. What if Donald Trump just decides, I'm going to close down the border? Mm-hmm. Half of our region would be we cannot afford people to just sit this one out. Mm-hmm. And it's it's not even partisan. I'm the leader of the Democratic Party, but if you think about it, none of these things are partisan. Mm-hmm. If you want the government to work, if you want the economy to keep on being an economy, if you want to have healthcare and not have all this these games and uncertainty in the economic or healthcare life of San Diegans, we need to get out and vote. Yeah. And so I think the turnout here, it's not going to be Obama levels, but it's going to be bigger than I think most special elections are, because I think people understand the stakes. There's a clear understanding of how big a deal this is, particularly in the Democratic Party. So we're going to fight to get as many people out as possible. Yeah.
And I think to your point, these issues that we've talked about, healthcare, environment, education, jobs, we didn't even talk about tariffs, right? And the devastating impact that it has had on our community. San Diego, we have ports. We are a port city. And so the impacts of tariffs are not only significant in terms of how much money we're paying for things, but it also impacts jobs, as to how many people are actually needed if you have a decrease in shipments. And so this is not a partisan issue. It should not be a partisan issue. And so when people are thinking about all of the things that have happened and whether or not to vote and whether or not to vote for or against it, I think the question that San Diegans and Californians need to think about is, are these things that are coming from DC, from this particular federal administration that this Congress has just rubber stamped, even though in their heart of hearts at times they know it's not the best for their constituents, they've still just rubber stamped it. Are these things that are good for me, my community, and my family? And is this the direction that I would like for our country to continue going? Because it does have a direct impact on all of our lives. And so it's not a partisan thing. It should not be a partisan thing. It should really be you doing self-reflection privately or publicly if you want, as to whether or not things are going the way in which you would want us to go as a country, because it does impact us on a day-to-day basis. When is the election?
So it's November 4th. And so this will be, everyone gets a mail ballot, thanks to the wisdom of the legislature. And so we need to make sure that we get in those ballots. So if you have a ballot, as soon as it comes in, it should be coming in, we're in September, the end of September and the beginning of October. So in about 2 weeks, a little bit less, everyone should have a ballot and everyone should turn in that ballot and they should vote yes.
Okay. Well, this has been definitely a exciting conversation. Want to thank you so much for joining us today. I hope people continue to pay attention to these conversations, to look into Prop 50, to go out and vote. You don't have to really go anywhere. Just put your ballot in the mail and just send it off. But your voice on these issues are extremely critical, because when you are silenced, or when you silence yourself, that is when we find ourselves and our communities in peril. And that is unfortunately the road in which we are currently going down. So want to once again thank you all, Will, for coming. The message from our conversation today is that sometimes defending democracy requires difficult choices. When other states throw out rule book to rig elections, when Congress becomes a rubber stamp for authoritarian overreach, when our community's health and well-being hang in the balance, we have to act. Proposition 50 isn't perfect. It's not what any of us would choose in normal times. But these aren't normal times. It's temporary, defensive measure to ensure that California families don't pay the price for other states' power grabs. It's how we protect health care for millions, food assistance for children, and maintain some check on unchecked power. The prescription for defending our democracy isn't comfortable, but it's necessary. On November 4th, you have the power to fight back. Thank you all for tuning in to Prescribing a Healthier Future. If this conversation resonated with you, the best way to support our work is to rate, review, and share this episode with a friend or colleague. And make sure that you never miss a discussion. Please follow, like, or subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you tune in. Your support helps bring these important conversations to light. Until next time, be well, and remember, democracy is something we have to fight for every single day.